What's up, everyone? This is Ignatius, and this video is intended to be my one-stop place to learn anything and everything about the Infernalist build that is going to be my main build of the .5 Return of the Ancients League. Now, if you don't know, I already have a comprehensive Mobalytics guide out for this build that explains everything and takes you from level 1 all the way to 2 versions of the endgame. One of them is probably like a div or less on day 1, just depending on the cost of 1 unique. And the other is reasonably more expensive, though it's still not completely unethical. And there's going to be a lot more additional scaling to do, but I'm not going to invest tons of time into exploring the limits until we understand the league better and all of the league power that we have yet to learn how to abuse. So I have all of that here. I also made a first video. This was really just to kind of get something out there, and I had massive frame rate loss in the middle of this video, which was really a bummer. My PC actually overheated. I'm in my garage, and it was just hot in here, literally. So I thought it was kind of ironic. During my Infernalist video, it got too hot in order for the video to be clear. So anyway, this new round of video, this is going to be a long one. I'm going to bookmark things nicely for you, but this is for the learners. This is for the big brains who want to really understand how this works. And here, I'm going to really deep dive and pretend that I know how all this works. And usually when I make these videos, I come out on the other side of the feedback loop with the community, learning things that I did not already know and refining misconceptions that I had in what I thought I did know. So let's get into it. First major section of this video is going to be a broad explanation of the mechanics at work, what I think they are doing mathematically, and then how we're extrapolating those base game mechanics into Infernalist. Eventually, in this explanation, we will get over here to the actual builds and what I've envisioned for the 2 builds we will scale into this league. But let's dive in and just go into base mechanics. So this is Recoup Infernalist, and in order to really understand how it works and how to scale it one way or another within the mechanics of the game, you've got to understand what Recoup is actually doing. So first thing about Recoup is that basically when you take damage, you're going to get it back over 8 seconds versus a percentage of the Recoup that you have. So in the game, there's all sorts of ways to get Recoup. It's on gear, it's on belt, it's on amulet, it's on the tree. We have some new Recoup nodes this week. We have Recoup as energy shield. We have Recoup as life. There's lots of good stuff going on. We have Fizz Recoup. We have Ellie Recoup. We've got Recoup on Flask. Basically, it's pretty easy to hit over 100, and then it's not even that hard to hit reasonably over 100. And so we're going to pretend for this example that we are at 100 even, because it makes the math a lot easier to wrap our brains around. And we're going to pretend that we're taking 1,000 damage per second, when in actuality we're taking more on a shorter interval and recouping more than 100%, and we're recouping it as life and energy shield and completely abusing this loop. But to understand the loop, these are the numbers we're going to assume. So you take 1,000 damage, you have 100% damage recouped as life. Now, normally, over 8 seconds, and in .5, we can reduce this to 4 seconds, but we're going to stick with 8 seconds. Over 8 seconds, you're going to get the 1,000 damage back, split across 8 seconds. So if you take a 1,000 damage hit, and you got 100% recoup, and you wait 8 seconds, you'll be back to full health. Now, again, these are macro examples, but that's kind of how it works. This is 100 ice. He's there because he's awesome. Now, what if we had a way to take 1,000 damage every second permanently? What would happen? Well, each iteration of Recoup begins to stack on top of the other over time. So this is our first iteration. This is our second iteration spread over time, and third. So that by second 8 per second, we're recouping 1,000. We're back to recouping the exact amount of the damage that we are taking on each of these intervals. And so from second 8 onward, our recovery is identical to the damage that we take. As long as we're only taking 1,000 damage per second, we essentially aren't really losing life. Now, at this stage of, manipulating the mechanic, it isn't out of balance, right? Is very balanced, and it's actually quite unusable, right? Because you have to spend 8 seconds taking damage on purpose so that way you can just recover the same amount of damage that you were taking. What's the point? However, there's lots of things we can do to manipulate these intervals and rates so that we recover significantly more than what we take on an interval. And on the Infernalist,
You've received a shipment.
we're going to go ahead and deal a ton of damage to ourselves right here. And you can see our Recoup catching up over 8 seconds to the point where we are at 4.3k per second recovery, life, and energy shield. Which means that as long as I don't get one shot, I am constantly replenishing both my life and energy shield at the same time. It is kind of like 8k in this stack right here. So we are manipulating life and ES recovery rate. We're exceeding 100% Recoup effect. We are shortening the interval to underneath 1 second so that there are basically more columns stacking on top of each other within the 8-second window. And then we're exceeding the damage that we take significantly, right? So that's basically what's going on. And this is our broad disclaimer here. Realize this is a containerized macro scale. This is a concept, so your brain can understand what the game's doing on something that you can add a lot of nuance to, especially frequency. Okay, that's the end of explaining Recoup. All you big brains, give me a comment on what I got wrong. I'm sure there's something in there that I got wrong. All right, on to section number 2. How does Infernalist take this Recoup concept and abuse it so that our character is way more powerful than any character, I guess, ever should be in one of these games. First thing is Pyromantic Pact. This is on the Ascendancy. If you're unfamiliar with the Ascendancy, it's right here. And basically, it takes your mana away. Mana gone. Bye-bye. And it replaces it with Infernal Flame. And rather than Infernal Flame draining, Infernal Flame goes up. And when it hits the top, you take the value of your life and energy shield combined as fire damage, which goes through mitigations and then deals the damage to you, and then you recoup that damage. So when you see me casting a very expensive elemental weakness here, basically every 1.4 seconds, I am proccing 2 Infernal Flames. So again, we're shortening that interval to get more stacks in the column. And you'll see me initially take more damage than I can handle. But as the Recoup starts to stack, you take less damage. Because, the recovery is caught up, basically. Fighting the stream or swimming against the current or something like that. All right, so we're self-inflicting damage and then applying Recoup. Now, in order to self-inflict more, we're minimizing our mana because Infernal Flame is basically your mana cost. And if it's higher, like if I had 10k Infernal Flame, the interval on the graph, these bars would be like 5 seconds apart, right? So you wouldn't be able to stack the Recoup intervals properly. You would have just very slowly die if you had lots of Infernal Flame. And then also, in addition to minimizing your mana, you want to maximize your skill costs, which is kind of cool. There's nodes on the tree which have, quote, downsides, but for us, they are upsides. 10% reduced max mana is wonderful. Increased mana cost of skills is wonderful because that gets converted into Infernal Flame cost. And then eventually in the end game, we take a line of Olroth, Heroic Tragedy, and Knightly Tenants. The only thing we care about here is that it removes the mana gain from our intelligence, which is hilarious that is something that we want to do, but it is. And lastly, reduce your casting interval. You want to be casting as quickly as possible all of your skills, so that way even if you're not sitting here elemental weaknessing yourself, you're frostbolting yourself, you're flame walling, all of these cool things. Basically, you want to be proccing that Infernal Flame as quickly as possible. And in combat, when the cast on crit comets get going, who knows how frequently it is proccing. Visually, it's pretty hard to tell, but it's enough that not only do we not kill ourselves, but the Recoup amount just gets enormous in battle. All right, so that's what's going on with Pyromantic Pact. The next is Grinning Immolation, and here we get into a lot of like things that are borderline specific to a build type and not necessarily generic. But here, when you deal a crit, you become ignited, and you take 15% of your globes as fire damage per second. You get 50% more. That's a more modifier, so multiplicative of your base critical damage bonus, which is, crazy, crazy good. So again, we're dealing damage to ourselves on purpose, and then we're going to recover it. Luckily, it's still fire damage. Everything is fire damage, so we can stack fire res, and we can even take specific items that have fire damage recouped as life. Now, this node, as soon as we're going to go with this node in a build, there's all sorts of other things we want to do with the Ascendancy. We're going to take Baydot's Will. Hopefully I'm saying that right, which is right down here. And we're going to reserve 25% of our health globe. For some reason on this computer, you don't get to see the health globe reserve, but on my other, I do. It's probably something in my UI settings that I need to change. But yeah, then you get advantages for reserving the 25%. The biggest advantage is that with a Coward's Legacy belt, which is like a 1 Exalt belt, you are permanently at low life. You can take Pain Attunement for 30% more crit bonus, Execute 3 for 30% more damage, and then 60% more when the enemy is low life. You can do Blind and Blindside to further stack crit and crit bonus with more modifiers. And then you get this spirit for free based on your life scaling. We're not totally sure how totems are going to work in .5, but I assume that I want 150 spirit reserve for 2 spell totems in pre-buff boss fight situation. So yeah, as soon as we go Grinning Immolation, we're doing all of this stuff over here. And then there's a whole nother thing we're going to do with the Ascendancy on day 1 when we are poor, and that is Demon Form and Mastered Darkness. Now, if you don't know, Demon Form is this basically persistent buff you can put on your Infernalist, and it lasts as long as you have life. As soon as you run out of life, Demon Form goes away. And then while it lasts, you gain 3% more spell damage per Demon Flame increment. And you also get like a permanent boost to cast speed, which is pretty reasonable. And then you can take Master Darkness so that Demon Flame has no maximum. So in one of the builds, we're going to take this persistent recoup effect, and basically we will have permanent uptime of Demon Form with unlimited stacks. In a map, you usually get up to over 100 stacks, which is 300% or more spell damage. And so you get infinite damage scaling. And I say for free, we're just using Recoup to achieve this. Free meaning it's completely item independent. It's an item neutral buff. So really, really powerful. So again, why Infernalist? Here's all the tools. The biggest one is Pyromantic Pact. As soon as this is in place and the Recoup shell we explained is solidified in what we're doing, we have all sorts of other options to capitulate on the value of Infernalist and some of these powers in Infernalist. So in the next 2 sections, we're going to get a little bit deeper of a dive on those options and the 2 build variants specifically. Okay, part 3 here, we're going to talk about a couple more items that can help scale the Recoup shell. The first one is Sacrosanctum, which is our GOAT. I believe I first used this item in .3 for an AFK Immortal build that people really, really enjoyed, and I still get asked about it every league. But basically on Ritual, we used the doubling Recoup effect to make an AFK Immortal Sim 4 farmer. And the reason you can do things like that are so ridiculous is that whatever Recoup you have on life, it also happens on Energy Shield. So if your build is running a dual globe and you have the capacity to take damage from both, which there's some things in the game that just make it happen inherently, like chaos damage, but you can also force it upon yourself to take them both, then you're recouping both. And wherever you're recouping both, you're doubling, 100% more recoup is happening when you do this. Now, once we get to the end game and we have decent item scaling in place, this line on Sacrosanctum will make our Infernalist nearly unkillable. Except for getting one-shot by stuff. And that's where just the other defensive layers are going to be important. But you can further beef up this component by intentionally having damage taken bypasses. And as far as I can tell, we can easily get 20 or a little bit more than 20 with a Krangle on that series right here. And what this does is it double dips our graph. I mean, it's probably obvious at this point, but on 100% recoup with the bypass, we then get 1000 ES and 200 life per second recoup. And then, of course, if we're taking more in the life pool from actual modifiers or damage in the game, then it's, scaling. So in this, with a clear 1000 per second damage incoming, but, a double dipped 120% recoup in both pools, you can see that our graph starts to stack beyond, even without, all of the things we're doing with Infernalist and intervals and things like that. So once again, extrapolate the logic here and look at the game visually, and you'll see like how powerful it is to apply this double dipping mechanic and why the build just doesn't really work without our goat here, Sacrosanctum. Okay, next up, we're going to move into the actual builds. I'm going to basically walk you through the logic of the cheap day one viable, infinite damage, a little bit less quality of life, and more difficult scaling build. And then we'll walk through the more expensive week one viable, but still not unethically min-maxed version. Both of these, without any additional nerfs, will clear everything that we think is coming at us in the game. The one on the left, the cheaper one, is going to clear it more slowly, because it relies on Demon Form and the damage scaling from Demon Form. And the one on the right is just going to be your, classic PoE2, walk up to the boss and take them down with a single whack type of thing. And I'm excited to see how unethical we're going to be able to make this. It's going to be pretty great. Okay, so let's move into the cheap day one viable version. What is this? So it's pretty basic. It's just Spark. And it's Spark that has its own set of damage that you rely on. It infrequently procs cast on crit, but it does it enough that the cast on crit double Comet will take out bosses very nicely, including Xesht, in about 10 to 15 seconds. Everything else is kind of icing on the cake. Frostbomb and Orb, these are just for infusions. The Spellslinger Flame Wall applies to all of the Spark projectiles, so it is pretty good. Siphon Elements is totally optional. You just probably have extra spirit because it's Sacrosanctum, so why not? And then Elemental Weakness is actually pretty important for the bosses, and a short pre-buff when you get into a map to get that recoup stack that we're talking about going. It's kind of smart to take Elemental Weakness, slam it down for a few seconds just to get some intervals going, and then hop into your map so that way your recoup is really solid as you get started. So that's what's going on with skills. Equipment, there's not really anything that's a huge big deal to call out here, but there are a few things to note and for you to realize. So one is, on a regular rare belt, you can roll this mod guaranteed with an essence. Fire damage taken, recouped as life. I did detail that over here, but basically a perfect essence of insulation is going to be slammed on a rare belt. It's going to remove a suffix and add this suffix guaranteed, and that is pretty solid, super cheap addition that plays into the strength of the build really quickly. Another massive upgrade for the variant would be a Melagaros. Last season, these were a little expensive on the first few days, too much for me to invest in it. Remember that with Demon Form, we are getting damage for free no matter what. But if you can get a Melagaros and not have to care about crit bonus scaling whatsoever, it's kind of nice in the cheap version of this build. Another cornerstone would be this flask. It's usually really cheap, free recoup. And another would be a dowsing charm, basically free. This is a really crappy one. Been using it. It allows you to ignore the first ignite, or maybe the first few ignites. How does this actually work? Oh yeah. Wait, did I not have any charges? Maybe I didn't have any charges. Let me see here. I guess try again. Okay, yeah. We ignore the first ignite, and we ignore night for... Look at that. That's actually a really long time. We ignored night for about 3.3 seconds, if my math is right. And that allows you to build up that recoup really cleanly on the initial one, and then also just ignore some ignites later. On the jewels, so these are just like, I slotted into Mobalytics some generic sapphires and rubies as a way of showing you what you could do. The rubies are max fire res, skill effect duration for spark, and then you can do alien fire damage for fire infused Comet, and then all your damage. The sapphires actually can be really good. You can take max energy shield, curse magnitude, you get recoup, crit chance, crit bonus. You can also scale energy shield from focus. So lots you can do there with the basic jewels if you want to. And these can be 3-to-1 at the bench. So just like grab them at will and start slamming around. Sacrosanctum, again, this is the GOAT. You got to have it. I don't know how popular this build is going to be. Usually my builds are not that popular, so it shouldn't be too expensive, but keep an eye on it in your trade watches. So for the cheaper build, the Ascendancy looks very different. You're going Demon Form, Max Demon Form. You're taking Bay Dot Chain away. You're going to take Grinning Immolation away because you're not really caring about scaling crit bonus at this time, and you're going to do Bringer of Flame, which basically just makes everything cause more Ignite and more Ignite magnitude. It's just like a, difficult to calculate damage buff across the board. Okay, that is the cheap day one viable version, and I'm going to record a basically a play session, or what do they call it? My brain's not working. A showcase of this version right now. Okay, now we'll go kill Zeshi Boy with the cheap version. Always pre-buff. Don't be too cool to pre-buff, everyone. Oh, one thing to mention that's, I suppose, relevant. I have not clicked my health blast in most of these demos. So, and that's just like worth mentioning because of quality of life. Like, nobody wants to keep track of a health blast. So that is just to say that it is completely optional to spam it. Beautiful. This is beautiful. How fun is it going to be this powerful on day one in what is, aside from one unique chess piece, an SSF viable build? And you can see pretty much all the comets are fire infused. Like, I'm getting so bored by Zeshing that I'm starting to just like look at my little icons up top. Because of the siphon, like, we have plenty of infusions. I'm not paying attention at all to where they are. Just like hitting spells. Took some damage there. Boo-hoo. Alright, we're going to skip all this. Because we need to be good boys and we need to keep our demon form up. It actually went down there a little bit. Alright, here we go. Time to be good gamers. He did not have elemental weakness on. I'm bad. Beautiful. Beautiful, baby. She's pretty gnarly, man. She's pretty gnarly. Okay, so let's run down the differences between the cheap version we just saw and the endgame expensive version. So probably the most prominent change is that we switch from Spark to Frostbolt. The main reason that this is so much better is that Frostbolt has a higher base crit chance than Spark. So you'll see Sparks is 9%, Frostbolt is 12%. And because of that difference, and with the blindside tech, Frostbolt hits 100% crit chance with pinpoint. And I think it's like at 93 without it, if you wanted your Frostbolt itself to do more damage. And this is going to proc more comets. So that's the first and most prominent change. The next is that we do want to activate Frostbolt blindside. And we may even use blindside on cast on crit if we don't have Uhtred's Omen, or if it's like just wildly expensive. So our Spellslinger has a Spark and a Flame Wall with a blind 2, so that everything is blinded. And the Spellslinger recharges so quickly, and we leave it on permanent cast, so everything's blinded all the time. The Frostbolt is crit capped, and then if you don't have Uhtred's, the blindside can do more crit bonus for the cast on crit comets. In the POB in this setup, and just doing some quick math, each comet, or sort of the average damage per comet with, according to POB, was like 1.2 million. So your cast on crit proc should be around 2.4 million. And that's just like, base damage on an Uber boss. Then you're going to be reducing resist. You're going to be applying exposure. So it should be like an incredible amount of damage. Another huge thing we do is we swap the belt from the rare belt to the low life belt, and we swap the ascendancy from demon form to Beidot so that we are permanently low life. And then when we are permanently low life, execute gems look great everywhere because they are 30% more damage against everything. And if a minion is on low life, I believe it is 60% more damage. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Demon form does show up over here. I think that's just because of how the POB imported and I need to delete it. It shouldn't be there. Blink is optional, but it's pretty nice. Siphon element still optional, but it's pretty nice. And we have 6 links everywhere because this is the expensive version. On to more gear changes. We have to drop Melagaros because we are scaling crit bonus. So we go with the 2-socket rare gloves. Doesn't really matter what they are, but they do need to be there. Oh, I didn't mention this, but in order to run Frostbolt, you have to have the ring. The ring is basically a requirement. It's called Snake Pit. Essentially what this ring does, if you don't know, it makes it so that your Frostbolt cannot pierce, and that makes it so that the Frostbolt explodes on every monster, and the explosion is double damage of the projectile. So, really powerful. It also has a radius. Multiple Frostbolts can explode in radius of each other and apply to the same monster. Massive amounts of damage, but you have to have Snake Pit, otherwise it's just pretty bad. The rares get buffed all around. There is like kind of a Giga Chad aspirational version of the amulet that is a Gloam amulet, so you can run 4 suffixes because you don't really need the last prefix because you don't care about mana. Don't forget, you don't want mana anywhere on any gear at any time. We also run the Heroic Tragedy to remove mana from intelligence. We run all blue jewels to double stack crit damage bonus because you really don't need more recoup at this point. And then we make the Ascendancy swaps into the full-on crit damage bonus plus extra spirit reserved with Bay Dots over here, which I think we're going to be using for spell totems. Okay, with that explanation in mind, let's hop over and get a little showcase of the more expensive variant. Okay, so again, this is going to be a demonstration of the more unethical, more expensive version. This version does run Frostbolt. Because it has a higher base crit hit chance, it procs more comets, it's better on bosses, the clear is just as clean, maybe even cleaner than Spark. However, Frostbolt does require a Snake Pit in order to be your general clear, like it really does, and Snake Pit, I am told, is somewhat rare at League Start and potentially more expensive. So you may just want to ignore this later Frostbolt approach for a while. For the demonstration here, I'm just going to show a very short part of a map. So we're going to take this 8-mod corrupted thing, put it into this fortress. We'll go in there and kill some stuff, and then we'll go delete Xesht, and you can kind of see how it goes. So again, get a quick pre-buff of the LE weakness, and you're off to the races. We lose the demon form, the really cool dodge roll of demon form. So we add blink. And we don't know if we're going to have new ways to abuse cooldown recovery, but if we do, obviously, we'll use those on the blink. One of the things wonderful about this build is that it looks awesome. Look how cool you look. Who wouldn't want to run this? Also, make sure you're in a cold room or it's going to overheat your computer. Actually, I think I have all my settings like on max, so it's probably the main contributor of the overheating. But, okay. Sufficient is a day. You get it. It deletes maps really nicely. All right. Zeshi Pie. Here we go.
Some goods in.
Don't forget to pre-buff your Recoup. If you don't, like the very first monster could hit you with something and bring about your end. Especially since my other resists are not capped, because I've kind of just like experimentally put these builds together in standard to prepare. But yeah, pre-buff the Recoup. You'll be glad you did. At some point, you'll die to something not pre-buffing it. Also, blink is dangerous. At the end of each blink, there's like still this little micro sprint. I don't know if they plan to fix that, but there's a script you can run that turns it off. I don't believe it is against terms. I can't remember, but I've seen like a lot of prominent people use it, so I think it's fine. You didn't hear it from me, I guess, because I just don't really know. What else to say? Oh, playstyle. All I'm doing, you'll see my Frostbolt is on right click, and my Spell Slinger is on middle mouse, and my blink is obviously spacebar. All I do is I permanently hold down right click and middle mouse, and I blink. So it is, even though it looks like a mess, it is very cozy. Good job, Comets. Almost got a heavy stun there on that blink. I saw it almost happen. That one too. We get further style points for constantly proccing Arbiter's Ignition. Okay, boss time. Again, pre-buff, pre-buff, pre-buff. We're going to have Xesht come out. We're going to pre-buff our Recoup here. And now we're going to do some exposure and some stuff. And we'll try not to die. I don't know what's going on. Feels like my stuff's not working. There we go. Now it's working. That was a little odd. Something was going on at the beginning there. I don't know what it was. I have to rewatch to just see what's actually happening in the game, basically. Okay, that completes showing off the more expensive Frostbolt variant. Okay, everyone, this brings the long-form video for this build to a conclusion for now. Tomorrow is League launch, and between tomorrow and 7 days following, we will probably be adding twice as much content to this layout, i.e. our understanding of the build. Now, if you're on Discord, and if you want to join our community and collaborate with us on Discord, please come on over. This is the main reason that I do everything I do in the game publicly, is that I love to build a community of like-minded, passionate ARPG gamers, and that's what we have here. Have some members of the community that started an in-game community guild. If you're interested in joining, come post a message in this channel. Reach out to Tainted Tats or Long-Armed Rex. We also have some really, really brilliant, way smarter than me goats in this Discord, and they are generous with their time. Curse will help you with crafting and everything else. And I9, some more digits, is also brilliant and will help you with builds and economy. And Average Zal and Arc, if they're playing this league, can help you with any build and any understanding of the game. So come on by the Discord and be more a part of what we're doing on the social side, community building side of the game. Hope this was helpful. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your League launch and 0.5 Return to the Ancients experience. Adios.